Was the sanction against Oscar Piastri for the multiple accident at Interlagos fair? And what about Lewis Hamilton? Is the FIA being fair in its decisions, or are we seeing another case of hidden favoritism? Stay, because what happened at the Brazilian GP goes beyond simple penalties. It could change the course of the championship and open a crack within Formula One itself. During the chaotic 2025 Brazilian Grand Prix, held at the always unpredictable Interlagos circuit, Oscar Piastri's name went from being one of the main threats to the world title to being at the center of the media and sports hurricane. Lap 6 marked a before and after in his season. It all happened after the first restart of the safety car, a moment in which the drivers are usually at their limit, both in tire temperature and concentration. Piastri, who started from 4th position on the grid, was in an ideal situation to consolidate himself in the direct fight for the podium, or even for the victory. What he did was take a risk. Too much. Perhaps blinded by the need not to lose ground to his teammate Lando Norris, who was already leading the race after a great start. Upon reaching the first corner of the circuit, the famous S for Senna, one of the most technical and treacherous areas of the entire calendar, Piastri launched himself on the inside with an aggressive maneuver on Kimi Antonelli, who had had a weak restart. What was probably intended to be a calculated overtaking ended in a nightmare scenario. 3 cars found themselves in parallel, entering a curve that does not allow room for more than 2 cars at full throttle. At that moment, the analysis of the sensors on Piastri's car revealed a crucial piece of information. His left front tire was completely blocked, losing traction and braking capacity. This meant that, although the Australian driver tried to correct the trajectory, his car was no longer responding accurately. As Antonelli closed his line towards the apex, as any driver would naturally do when defending his position, Piastri could no longer avoid contact. The McLaren collided with the side of the Mercedes. And on the rebound, Antonelli was thrown against Charles Leclerc's Ferrari, which was on the outside and without room to maneuver. A domino effect caused by 1/1000th of a decision, but with gigantic consequences. The front suspension of Leclerc's SF25 broke instantly. It was one of those dry impacts with no room for recovery that leave any team empty-handed. The Ferrari was stopped on the side of the track with no possibility of continuing. This not only represented an abandonment in the race, but a serious blow to Ferrari in its attempt to score valuable points in the Constructors' Championship. The most ironic thing about the case is that none of the 3 pilots involved managed to really benefit. Not Antonelli, who fell several positions due to the damage received. Not even Leclerc, out of competition. And certainly not Piastri. The onboard cameras of the 3 cars involved were key in the commissioner's investigation. The McLaren's telemetry showed that, although Piastri slightly lifted his foot off the accelerator and attempted to brake early, the speed at which he approached the corner and the lack of a regulatory overlap put him at a clear legal disadvantage. The FIA rule is clear. To have the right to space when trying to overtake on the inside, the front axle must be at least at the height of the rearview mirror of the car you are trying to overtake. Piastri did not meet that criterion. Furthermore, his braking movement was late, partly caused by the attempt to avoid contact, but in fact ended up generating an inevitable collision. The FIA stewards, after analyzing all angles, determined in official document number 68 that the Australian was completely responsible for the incident. There was no room for ambiguity. The 10-second penalty was imposed immediately and had to be served at his first pit stop. For all practical purposes, this eliminated Piastri from any chance of fighting for the podium. He went from being in 2nd position momentarily to falling to 5th place in the end. Meanwhile, his teammate Norris escaped to the front to sign a crucial victory that widened the gap between them to 24 points. With just 3 races left on the calendar, the infighting at McLaren appears to have ended without the need for team orders. And all because of an overly ambitious maneuver in the wrong place at the wrong time. Beyond the emotional and sporting blow that the 10-second penalty in the Brazilian GP dealt to Oscar Piastri, the real and most lasting impact is found in an element that rarely receives the attention it deserves, but that has the power to ruin an entire season: the penalty points in the super license. What may seem like a minor fact to the casual viewer, in the internal world of Formula One is a constant countdown clock, a shadow that follows the driver in every corner and every risky maneuver. After the incident at Interlagos, the FIA not only imposed the time penalty, but also added 2 additional points to Piastri's super license. This brings its cumulative total to 6 points within the last 12-month period. And this is where the situation becomes critical. According to FIA regulations, any driver who accumulates 12 penalty points in the period of 1 year is automatically suspended for 1 race. No discussion. no appeal. And regardless of the context of the championship in which it finds itself. In a season as tight as 2025, where every point is vital and the competition is marked by thousandths of a second, losing a race is not just a symbolic sanction. It is a sentence that can mean the end of the fight for the title, the breakdown of the team dynamic, and even irreparably damage the reputation of a driver with his bosses and engineers. And what's worse, a suspension stains your competitive profile, something that remains an indelible mark in the Formula One environment. Initially, the specialized press was involved in confusion. Some media even reported that Piastri already had 8 points accumulated, which would have set off alarms even more. An official clarification from the FIA was necessary to confirm that, in reality, there were 6 active points on its record. A subtle difference, but one that marks the line between total panic and extreme caution. Detailed information on these points reveals a worrying pattern. The 2 most recent points come from the accident in Brazil. Another 2 are associated with the 2025 British GP, where Piastri was penalized for an infraction related to the restart after a safety car. Finally, the first 2 points in this sequence were obtained during the 2024 Abu Dhabi GP, for causing a collision with Franco Colapinto. Of the 6, 4 will remain in effect for much of 2026, meaning that even beyond this season, Piastri will have to bear the risk in every race. While Oscar Piastri's sanction made all the headlines after the 2025 Brazilian Grand Prix, there was another decision, much more subtle and silent, that went almost unnoticed by the general public, but that generated discomfort and many questions within the paddock. Lewis Hamilton, 7-time world champion and one of the most watched figures on the entire grid, was the subject of a formal warning by the stewards. An action that, despite not resulting in a penalty in time or points in the super license, lit the fuse of a hidden controversy about the criteria and uniformity with which maneuvers on the track are judged. It all started during the first stint of the race. At a crucial moment, as Hamilton was leaving the pits after his first stop, Lance Stroll was approaching on the fast lane. At that precise moment, Hamilton executed a maneuver that, for some, was a valid defense and for others, a dangerous action at the limit of the regulations. The Briton closed the trajectory very aggressively, forcing Stroll to brake sharply to avoid contact. There was no collision. There were no pieces flying. But it was a move that forced the commissioners to open a formal investigation. The result of this investigation was an official warning, a measure that in the FIA regulations is designed for situations in which the driver's behavior does not merit a direct sanction, but does deserve to be indicated as inappropriate or risky behavior. The problem is not the warning itself. It is the perception that, under other circumstances and with another name, that same maneuver could have had much more severe consequences. From a strategic point of view, this warning does not alter the results on the track. It does not add, it does not subtract. But in terms of narrative and internal pressure, it does add a new level of focus on the way Ferrari and Hamilton handle the limits. A simple warning can be an early warning sign for things to come. Because if the British driver repeats this type of actions in other races, although without immediate consequences, he could end up accumulating reprimands. And 3 reprimands in a season carry a penalty on the grid. Hamilton, for his part, did not comment on the matter after the race. He avoided controversial statements and focused on highlighting the team's work, the improvement of the car and his personal progress in the process of adaptation to the SF25. But inside the Ferrari box and in the silent corridors of the paddock, the theme remained. The championship is not only decided by speed and strategy. Sometimes, it is also defined on the fine line between what is allowed and what is sanctioned. And that margin, as we have just seen, can be as invisible as it is decisive. Before Brazil, the internal fight between Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri was still open. Both drivers had shown solid pace, with outstanding performances in the first dates of the calendar. Piastri, in particular, had been the most consistent in qualifying and had become a serious title contender. But what happened at Interlagos not only removed him from the podium, it also opened a gap that may be unbridgeable. With 3 races remaining on the calendar in Las Vegas, Qatar and Abu Dhabi, the 24-point gap that now separates him from Norris represents a critical disadvantage in the current championship context. The sanction against Oscar Piastri was forceful, clear, technically argued by the FIA and protected by the sporting guidelines that all drivers know. But it was also an example of the level of pressure that falls on the shoulders of a driver fighting for his first world title against a teammate in a state of grace. The maneuver was risky, yes. Was it intentional? No. Was it avoidable? Maybe. But in a sport where decisions are made at more than 300 kilometers per hour and in milliseconds, The subsequent cold and regulatory judgment never fully captures what happens inside the cockpit. On the other hand, the case of Lewis Hamilton represents the other side of the coin. A dangerous maneuver, but without material consequences, which ended only with a formal warning. There is no time penalty. There are no points on your license. Just a note on the weekend report. The inevitable question is whether that same action would have received the same treatment if it had been carried out by a rookie pilot, or by one with less media weight. And this doubt is not trivial. It is the root of the debate about coherence and fairness in the decisions of the commissioners. All this leads us to a broader reflection on current Formula One. What kind of sport do we want to see? One where pure talent prevails over isolated errors? Or one in which any slip-up, no matter how minor, is mercilessly punished? Do you think that Piastri's sanction was fair and proportional to what happened on the track? Or do you consider that he was a victim of the moment and the context? Does it seem reasonable to you that Hamilton has only received a warning, when other drivers for similar actions have received more severe sanctions? Leave your comment what you think about all this.